How do cultural attitudes, particularly American, shape our approach to nature?
That's an interesting question to think about. American culture. I think about, talking to different audiences and about biomimicry. And in this country, for instance, when I talk to engineers, and we got composites. These are materials that, like fiber within a matrix, a resin matrix. It's two materials in one that make it stronger. We got these high-end composites about 60, 70 years ago. And to tell them that the rhino's been doing it for 60 million years, you can hear a gasp in the audience almost. They're shocked. And what does that say about their own belief that the good ideas must have come from this enlightened mind, right? From the human brain. And I think as Americans especially, we really value an original idea. We have this brash entrepreneurial, we conquered this country on just one good idea after another, one original idea. And in a commerce of ideas, having an original idea is how you get your status.
Well, and how you make money.
And how you make money.
And so forth.
Exactly. So for them to say, I stand up and I say, we're going to talk about ideas today and none of them are going to be yours.
In fact, they're going to come from the lowly rhinoceros.
The lowly, exactly. Even in our language, we talk about the lower kingdom. And people will raise their hand and say, well, that's animals in the lower kingdom. And I say, wow, when did they become the lower kingdom? But it's embedded there. So I think for Americans, this idea of somebody else might have a great idea and you might simply emulate it. And that would be your contribution. And it wouldn't even be another person. It might be an octopus. So that's a stretch, I think. And I think Americans have a very complicated relationship with wilderness, with the wild.
How so?
Which, of course, the wild is the wellspring of these good ideas. Unencumbered evolution, which occurs in wild places, is where these ideas come from. So biomimicry, the ultimate, well, what should we do, is preserve wild habitats. Okay, so this relationship with wilderness is important. We came to this country, and we were terrified. We came from a relatively settled landscape that had been settled and farmed for thousands and thousands of years. And nature, except in pockets, had been pretty well leashed. We came here and we were confronted, right, with this wall of, it was terrifying. This was at a time when people, when they would take carriage rides across, near the Alps, would close the curtains when the horrifying, terrifying mountains would go by, because wilderness was a terrifying thing. We very quickly leashed that and tamed that and turned the prairie root side up and, overcut the whole eastern forests. And, we very, very quickly did that. The same America is the country that created the first national park. So we had this idea, this great and original idea of national park conservation, of conserving wild areas. So we sort of have fenced off wild areas now. So we've got this sort of dichotomy going on where we were a country that out of our fear cut down everything and then realized at the last minute and put wilderness in protected preserves. So we have this complicated relationship.